Welcome back to Go Figure School of Mathematics. Today we are on Lesson 76 of Saxon Algebra Half, Multiplication with Scientific Notation. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Alright, here are some warm-up problems to start. Go ahead and pause the video and you can answer the questions in the quiz below this video, and then press start when you're ready to check your answer. All right, so first question, where we have 3.04 times 10 to the third. Our exponent here tells us how many spaces to move our decimal point to the right. So this first one is going to be 3,040. So we're moving that decimal point 3 spots over. Our second one, our exponent is a -2, so that means we're going to move this decimal point 2 spots to the left, and we'll have to annex a 0 there, so we're going to have 0.08216. All right, our learning objectives today are to multiply numbers in scientific notation. So here we have just numbers that are not in scientific notation that we're multiplying. 5 times 100 times 1,000. We can first multiply 5 times 100 to get 500. And we can imagine that we have a decimal point here after our 5. And when we multiply by 100, it moves our decimal point 2 spots over because we have 2 zeros. And then we still have to multiply by 1,000. So when we multiply by 1,000, that decimal point that was here now moves 3 more spots to the right, 1, 2, 3, and then we get 500,000. Now we could rewrite this original expression with exponents or in scientific notation by doing 5 times 10 squared, which is 100, and times 10 to the third, which is 1,000. And then that would simplify this 10 squared times 10 to the third is the same as 10 to the fifth, because when you look over here, what we ultimately did was we moved our decimal point 5 spaces over to the right, and that would be the same, that would accomplish the same thing over here. When we multiply 5 times 10 to the fifth, that means we're going to start with 5 and move our decimal point 5 spaces over to the right to get 500,000. So we get the same answer. So we can use that when multiplying numbers that are in scientific notation. What we do is we're going to multiply the numbers without exponents, and then we're going to just combine the powers of 10 by adding the exponents on them, and then we're going to write our answer in scientific notation. So for example, see we have 2 numbers in scientific notation here and here. And we can regroup these numbers because it's all multiplication. So we can multiply them in any order. So we could get our numbers that don't have exponents, the 2 times 2, and then we can multiply that by our base 10 numbers that have exponents, 10 squared times 10 to the third. And so then we can simplify by multiplying 2 times 2, which is 4. And then 10 squared times 10 to the third would be, we just add up our exponents. So 10 to the fifth. 2 plus 3 is 5. So there, our final answer is in scientific notation. All right, and then this other example. So let's regroup our non-exponent numbers. So 3 times 4, and I can put that in parentheses, and then we'll multiply that by 10 squared times 10 cubed. So now we just multiply. 3 times 4 is 12. And then our base 10 with exponents. We add the exponents. 2 plus 3 is 5. So that means we have 10 to the 5th here. Now, this is not exactly in scientific notation yet, because when we do scientific notation, this first number can only have one digit before our decimal point. See, now our decimal point is here after 12, but we need it to be between the 1 and 2. So we can rewrite 12 in scientific notation on its own by saying this is 1.2 times 10 to the first power, right? That's another way to write the number 12, because if we multiply this by 10 to the first power, we would get 12, which is this. And then multiply it by our 10 to the 5th here. And now we need to simplify again. So our number out front is going to be 1.2. And then we have 10 times 1 times 10 to the 5th. Add those exponents. So we would get times 10 to the 6th. And this is our final answer because this is actually scientific notation. All right, and another example. So we're going to rearrange these to multiply our non-exponent numbers first, 7 times 3, and then we'll multiply that by 10 to the 6th times 10 to the negative 4th. 7 times 3, that's easy, 21. And then to multiply these numbers, we just add the exponents. So 6 plus a negative 4 is 2. So then that leaves us with 10 to the 2nd power. But again, this is not in scientific notation yet because our first number here it needs to be between 0 and 10, right? So we need to rewrite 21 as 2.1 times 10 to the 1st power. Okay, so 21 is the same as 2.1 times 10 to the 1st power. And then multiply that by this 10 squared. And now we can simplify. So we have 2.1. And then we need to add our exponents here. 1 plus 2 is 3. So then that leaves us with 10 to the 3rd power. Final answer here, 2.1 times 10 to the 3rd power. And here are practice problems for you to try on your own. Go ahead and pause the video, and then when you get your answers, put them into the quiz below to see how you did, and then we can work through the problems together. All right, so here we're going to rearrange our numbers here. We're going to multiply our non-exponent numbers. So 5 times 1 is 5. And then we have 10 to the negative 6 times 10 to the 9th. So we need to add our exponents there. Negative 6 plus 9 is 3. So that's 5 times 10 to the 3rd in scientific notation. Next, we want to combine our non-exponent numbers. So 3.1 times 3 is going to give us 9.3. And then our base 10 numbers with exponents, 10 to the 4th times 10 to the 7th. Add those exponents, and we'll get 10 to the 11th power. Okay, in our next one, we have 2 times 8, give us 16, and then multiplying by 10 and combine our exponents. Negative 7 plus negative 2 is negative 9. And this is not our final answer because it is not in scientific notation. So 16 can be rewritten in scientific notation as 1.6 times 10 to the first power. And then we still have to multiply it by 10 to the negative ninth. And then now when we simplify, we're left with 1.6 times 10, add our exponents, 1 plus negative 9 is negative 8. 10 to the negative 8. So there's our final answer. And that's all for today. So in summary, when we're multiplying numbers in scientific notation, we want to first multiply the non-exponent numbers, and then we're going to add the exponents of the base 10 multipliers, and then we just write it in scientific notation. And don't forget to simplify to make sure that your starting number, the one without the exponent, only has one digit before the decimal point. That is the way to be sure that you are in scientific notation. So go ahead and do problem set 76 in the textbook. There is a link to the textbook in the video description. And if you have any questions about this lesson or the assignment, just comment below. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks, and we will see you next time.